does one begin to tell the story of one's life? Where? That's a good question, but I think a better question, does one ever tell a story about one's life generally? Or does one have to have a specific context for that? Most times we hear about one's life is what is going to be called either an biography or an autobiography or the eulogy, when you yourself would not be hearing it. And of course you would not be telling it. But it's interesting that we sometimes have missed reflecting about one's life as one goes forward. The illustrations of one's life, or the experiences, let me say, are usually used presently from a negative perspective. So it's a reminder of the bad things because something has happened, or something has happened and you wish that good thing that you had previously should have happened today. But I am asking you about reflection in terms of just thinking about life, whether there were negative or positive issues or experiences, whether you want to use the word good or bad, different or indifferent. It's just life. And the last couple of broadcasts, we were talking about those concepts of emotional intelligence. Looking before I leap. How do I behave as I look to leap? How do I establish the credibility of my movement and understanding how I can fit wherever I am? And it's not that, as you would have seen in my last broadcast, take it or leave it. Because, you see, that's how we have continued to experience each other. It's either you take it or you left it. Did I sound good there? Yes. Take it or left it. But we do not seem to realize that connecting is important. We don't seem to realize that what you do affects me, or what I do affects you. And so it's important to understand in my life, how do I establish that balance of working harmoniously one with the other? How do I engage your differences for a positive outcome? I mean, is that possible? Or am I always going to be trying to find out what was wrong with you, or is wrong with that you did or said or looked or be? The constant, what should I say, analyzing or critiquing of each other is something that I'm hoping that one day we would lose and we would just accept and work with. I work with people all day. I work with several people in different dimensions, different stratas, different spheres. And there's always the issue of expectation of what one should hear. And my recent challenge of balance is to find the commonality of language. But yet, I know I can't, because we all have grown up with different cultures and socialized behaviors, and of course education, that brings us into a place where our language sets are quite sometimes not even comparable, but they're real. They're real, from the grassroots to the high-end Queen English, or passing through vernacular and slang and obscenities and the works. We find ourselves in a place where we have to learn how to engage each other with that effectiveness for future. And how do we work that? I want us to realize that I'm saying future, I'm saying how we are going to be, and that is what progression is. But because we want to be progressive, when I get up in the morning and I decide that I am going to go to work, somewhere along the line we are not thinking of 9 o'clock in the night. It's now maybe, and I'm saying we get up at 6 a.m. Are we thinking about 9 p.m.? No. We're actually thinking basically of getting to the job in the moment, at each hour, or rather half hour, to get there on time. and we have schedules or programs or what your job entails, and we are therefore there until we leave to go back home, and we call that progress. But when we come home, we realize that there's so many things that has to be done yet not done. So many decisions to be made, so many ideas we have that we can't seem to integrate that within our space and to have discussions or conversations that will lead and bring in that progressive context. So maybe next 5 years we look back and say, oh, did I say look back? Yes. We review that to see how best I am or how would I do. And if I look forward, I'm now going to be struggling to identify with how I could get there. And therefore it means education, it means promotion, it means more money, it means we have that kind of analysis into the going forward. But how do we work from coming forward from where we are or where we were in order to really establish that progressiveness? And it's important for us to know that. How do we find that and yet be productive? Because I want to produce. Progressive, yes, but I want to produce. Because some people can see themselves progressing, but there is no fruitfulness. You might say, Dr. Niles, that doesn't really make sense. But it's a reality. Because you see, I can go today, it's whatever day you want to use. Let's just say January. And then all of a sudden, it's going to be December. But so I have had to go through February, March, April, May, all those months. But at the end, let's say like in August, can I substantially say, hey, I have gained, I have fruitfulness here, I see better than, oh, I've seen increase. But you see, you have progressed. And so therefore, it is important for us to note the measure of this progression, or rather I say progressing, in the context of what I am, having as increase, what I am seeing as something that I have earned. Now, that's another context of how we are going to identify this issue of earn. Because most times we talk about earn, we talk about money. We're not talking about maybe the earning of personality. I have grown in my personality. I've grown in the concepts of how I deal with people. So there is less negative emotion. I have learned of how to not be so in control and allow my personality to bring a more collective control. I have grown and I've earned in the fact of how I can assess without anger and anxieties and confusion, assessing very systematically to bring about a greater context for my productivity. So my earnings here is not always substantially dollars and cents. It's not substantially something we call wealth. It's substantially life that is much more meaningful for my tomorrow. How do I rationalize this? And how do I come into that place where I can agree in terms of how I am working? So in doing that, it's important for me to see, as I just shared, there are spheres or dimensions that are necessary for integrating. How do I work with? How do I gain without a with? You see, some people feel that progression has to do with me, but in terms of my progression, it is being the collective context of me working with people, working with, first of all, my environment. How do I maneuver in my own house? Where do I put my chairs and tables? It's to bring access from one space to another without using the word block or hindered. So we are accustomed working an environment to decrease block and hinder. We are accustomed working in an environment to identify movement from one room to the other, from inside to outside. So that when I get in a greater capacity of thought and I see myself as a business person or an educator or a student, how do I fit things so as I can go further on? You see, when we tell children about tidying and maintaining a house and washing wares or keeping one's room clean, it's not a chore. It's about a principle of understanding progression and productivity in terms of how I integrate my space. And in that space, there are people. With people, there are philosophies and thoughts and decisions and ideologies, etc. How do I work with that difference? And that's where my success story ought to be. How do I define that integration? How do I work together with people? How do I establish how I am going forward? It's not something. How are we going forward? Do you want to go forward? Yes, but I can't do it by myself. So I have to learn how to help my household, let's say, whether it's just 2 or 3 or even 1, to make sure I don't trip over something or I don't stumble, but I put it in places. So I know how to set things. I know how to create that. And that's what I like. That is important for me to see this other big word, discipline. Because I am just not helter-skeltering. That may not, I'm not good with these words, but helter-skelter. I am not doing things ad hoc will be my word. I am not doing things ad hocly. But there is a measure of structure that is not very, it's not cast in concrete, but it lays a means by which I can work out where I'm going. So that there's a measure of discipline that must be involved in my own thought life. So here it is that I am coming back to this issue of emotional intelligence. How do I allow that to work? How do I bring that into my very person? You see, discipline is not about a hard and fast, no-nonsense thing. Because you see, that no-nonsense thing really encourages you to fight with the nonsense. And you become very intolerant with what you consider nonsense, but to the other person might be very applicable because of their level of interpretation and analysis and understanding. We are therefore to realize how it's important to find ourselves working a cohesive plan, bringing into that connectivity, bringing into that the integration, bringing into that area of spontaneity that brings the awareness of. That's discipline. It's not just when I am hard and fast and doing it the right way, cross my T's and dot my I's. No, hold on. We are talking about LIFE, life. But do I get anxious? Do I get bothered? No. I learn how to find relevance. Yes, relevance. How can I bring my disciplined self to be relevant, to be, and I want to use the word relevant rather than to use the word accepted, because we sometimes have problems with the opposite of accepted, rejected. And it's important for us to note that we have to find that concept of relevance, so that in what I do and how I do it, I am not just trying to be anything and I don't care, or I am not concerned how it fits. I must be concerned, because see, if we're talking about progression and productivity, it's okay for me, Kenneth, to throw grains of corn on the ground and says, grow, it will grow. But you see, if I am disciplined enough to be progressive, I will lay rows, and I will dig holes, and I'll put grains of corn and cover it up. And I'll do that several times until I may do, let's say, a 30 by 40 yard plot. And then next couple of weeks, I see them all growing. That's what I'm talking about. My behavior was relevant to the progression and the growth of my corn. So discipline is, as I said earlier, it's not just about trying to be right or wrong. The discipline is important for me to find relevancy, and relevancy is not just the now manifestation of what's happening. It's also the result of how I have worked my productivity because of my discipline. So discipline yields the relevance. It's hardy, and it's established, and it concerns, and all the factors around, and it brings, as it were, everything into oneness, and we can see the applicability of every item that is in the space, and we say, yes, we connect. Oh yes, synergy. Oh yes, life. Yes, and of course we are happy. Yes, we are, may I use another word here, we are content. We are just ready to go on. So what has happened to you in your past? And we may want to look at that some months to come. What has happened to you in your past? Whether they have been negative issues, whether it's been abuse or failures or confrontations or mismanagements, we have to see that those things are not just bad, but they are going to be now instruments that we can use that to help us to be much more disciplined in terms of how we lay things out for production, how we use things that made us cry, maybe made us very, very depressed or upset, angered. We can use those very same things now differently. I may fall over a chair or skid on the ground. I'm not just going to take up all the tiles or mash up the chair. I'm going to wipe the tiles. I'm going to fix the chair differently. If it breaks, I'm going to mend it back. And we do those things very much in a living space. But when it comes to personalities, when it comes to my actual living, I am quicker to react and find fault and target people and label them rather than to find relevance in all that's around me to go forward. I'm encouraging you today that whatever life is, it's important for that is to be a stepping stone, a genesis for your tomorrow. So therefore, productivity, progressiveness, it's all linked into that discipline that brings my relevance. And as I said earlier on, I don't want to use that word, and I don't want you to harp on that word, reject. I want to see, how can I define my tomorrow with relevance? I want to be applicable to what's around me. I want to make sure I can be involved and to bring meaning to. And of course, what we can discuss later on too, sometime to come, is how do I define that conversation? Because some people hate to talk. Some people say, zip. No! Discipline means I must bring it into order by speaking, by sharing. And relevancy is going to cause you to define much more vision for your life and for tomorrow. So let's begin to see that emotional intelligence is not just two words that has come up in the last couple decades. that creates a particular kind of euphoria of behavior. No! It's here for us to understand LIFE life. It's here for us to understand that through our cultures and our traditions and all those that come from a family of origin and from our ancestors, all those things we just don't dump. But because they're here, we need to know how to make it fit so that I can be relevant for my tomorrow. So let's go forward happily. Let's go forward energetically. Let's go forward with that concept of synergy and connectivity, knowing that my life is meaningful and I'm able to work with all the different things. And I want to repeat, you work with so much differences, so many differences in your home. The chair versus the table versus the floor versus the wall versus the fridge versus the stove. Every one of those are individual items, but yet we have a connectivity with them. If you have that kind of mindset, I present to you humans, I present to you space, I present to you environment. Let's see how we can work that together for the good. So let's see how we can keep it clean, cook a great meal, sit at the table and enjoy, and know that each part of this is relevant for my future, and how am I going to enjoy it happily. So Dr. Kenneth Niles saying to you, grace and peace. Life is not just today, it's your tomorrow.